Welcome to LCAP Development Series session number 3. This session will be focusing on revisiting your LCAP to meet local needs. My name is Chip Wilson. I am going to be joined by Jonathan Gage and Candy Huizar, and we will be facilitating all of today's content in this video. Next slide here is a picture of the team. This is the team that is bringing you all of the LCAP development trainings. We will be supporting you throughout the LCAP process with curriculum. We also have our fiscal analysts here at KCSOS that will be supporting you with the fiscal side of the LCAP. We're excited to be able to partner with our fiscal team and deliver all of these trainings. Speaking of fiscal partners, today we are going to be joined by Max Garris. He's a district fiscal analyst, and he will be helping us out with action tables today. So just a quick reminder of kind of where we've been and where we're going. You first received a training video from us regarding engaging educational partners back in January. I think it was January 31st. We should have emailed it to you. Then Michael and Lily did the last session analyzing progress toward your LCAP goals, and they had a follow-up virtual session. Let's see, we were released on the 17th. The video was about a week later. We did a video virtual follow-up that you can register to come to, and we help you out and answer questions together. Today, obviously, we're doing the revisiting your LCAP to meet local needs, and the follow-up to this session will be in a week on March 8th. After this, we'll have increasing improving services, and I want to note some date changes here. The revised, video date is going to be March 23rd. That's actually after you're going to get the budget overview for parents video with a revised follow-up virtual workshop on March 30th. So just want to make sure that we mention that. Basically, we shifted a little bit just to based on feedback we're just adjusting. It's a lot of content we're delivering, and we're finding that it's taking people a little bit longer to get through it. So we want to make sure that we're supported there. This is the session resources. So you have how you got this video. The video is linked here, but this is a wealth of information. Our hyperlinks on this session resources sheet. You'll find everything that we have in the slides will be linked here. Some of the slides are actually hot linked for you, as you'll find out as well. Our goal here is to just provide you with all the various tools we're providing for session 3 right here. Just like each of our sessions has its own session resources sheet. This is the parking lot, so I'm going to go back. One of the links here, the parking lot right here, you can see where my cursor is, will get you to this sheet. We encourage you, as you go through this video, we want you to ask questions that you have. We will be looking at this, responding in real time over the course of the next week, and we're going to address all of the questions that come up and the responses at our follow-up session, along with some other content-related pieces. So just know if you ask a question, we'll answer it. If we don't know the answer, we'll find out and answer it. We're all kind of all in this together when it comes to LCAP every year. As we know, we're learning a lot right along with everybody. So this slide is, you saw this last week with Lily and Michael. This is just a call out to say, this little guy with the magnifying glass, highlight kind of lessons learned from LCAP, past, from county offices, from the CDE. Our intent is to help you to be as transparent as possible, both to help the reviewers ensure that the LCAP is meeting all statutory requirements, but also to avoid unnecessary negative attention from advocacy groups who may be questioning transparency in LCAP. So when you see this little guy with the magnifying glass, we're going to be pointing out some of those lessons learned throughout our sessions this whole season. Today's objective, pretty simple. We're going to share guidance on possible ways to revise your LCAP, your metrics, your goals, actions based on your LEA's local needs. Everybody's navigating through the pandemic. In a lot of cases, baseline scores are going to be better than what we get for year one outcomes. That's just a reality. We want to make sure that you're supported in how you might adjust goals, actions, metrics. So that's what this session is all about. This is another slide that you saw last week or last session. It really contains the framework for continuous improvement. It's all about equity and making sure that we build equity into the document. It's about transparency and letting your educational partners know how things are going, where you are. It's not perfect. We know that. It's been a rough couple of years. So being transparent about where you are in your process and how things are going is really important. And then, of course, local control. You're going to be able to adjust your LCAP based on what you need to do from, looking at your data, your local data, and your local needs. So really important. So we just want to make sure we ensure that this is truly an equity document, that we're transparent in how we are reporting, and that you do have that local control. Skipping slides here. This is, again, another slide you've seen last week or last session. And the ordering of the documents from left to right when you do turn them in the end of June. It'll be the budget overview for parents, which is a part of the LCAP this year. The supplement to the LCAP, so interesting to be board approved by, as of today, February 28th. So this year is a part of the LCAP. The template narrative and action tables, we're working on those today and throughout our sessions. And then the instructions, really important to include those, as it provides insight into how the writer is writing and what the details are. So the prompts are the prompts, but then we write to the instructions, as you know. So really important to include those. So that's the entire LCAP this year. Next slide is, again, just kind of a visual of what we're going to be covering. Make sure you understand that you see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you see that document that denotes that this is also in your resources handout that you saw earlier. So there's a handout here, and in this case, it's the template, and it's the same template we've had the whole time. It hasn't changed, but we do want to make sure that you have access to it. So the little icon will signify that there's a resource document. I guess if we were in person, this would be one of those hard copies, but we're not. Important slide here. Again, you saw this last session. Really want to make sure that we highlight this model for continuous improvement, and for you to keep it in mind as you consider that goal analysis process you've just gone through. Really, really critical. The three main questions here are listed in the yellow. What specifically are we trying to accomplish? Typically, that comes through your goals, your rationale, what your local needs are tied up into those goals. A lot of times we have 1, 2, 3 goals. Actually, we don't have one goal. We have a lot of districts with 2 and 3 goals, some four goals. Again, all based on local need, what you're trying to accomplish. Then the second question, how will we know that a change is an improvement? Critical question, and that's through the metrics. That's through the feedback you're getting. That's through progressing through your plan. Typically the state priorities and the accompanying metrics really are aligned to support your goals. And then what changes might we introduce and why? Again, the part of today is all about what are we going to adjust and why. We're going to adjust a goal, we're going to adjust some metrics, we're going to adjust some actions, all things that are completely possible and probable, actually. So really critical to our process. Notice the circle, the plan, do, study, act cycle. That's what the LCAP's all about, you guys. So it's about planning and trying it out, doing it, studying. Those results really is where the goal analysis piece comes in, that study. And then you're going to plan to, then you're going to act again. And so it's a cycle, the cycle of continuous improvement. That's what it's going to be all about today, and how we relate this slide to our process. This equity through line takes that past previous slide and moves it even further forward. Just considering the changes, do you want to, do you need to change a goal? Do you need to adjust a goal? Metrics, what are you reporting out and how? Are you looking at all students? Are you looking at student groups? Are you doing a comparison between the two, trying to narrow the gaps? Actions. A lot of times we've heard a lot about changing actions up, adjusting them, maybe even removing some actions from the LCAP and adding some new actions. We're going to cover all of that with the intent to improve outcomes for kids. You guys are course correcting through a pandemic or plandemic, however you want to say it. But improved outcomes is our goal. We want to support all our students, including English learners, low-income foster youth, and just high-need students in general. Everybody. This slide kind of just depicts, so Lily and Michael went through the goal analysis piece last session and how that relates to today's session of looking at your goals, looking at your metrics, measuring and reporting results, and then your actions too. So there's the connection for you. And today I'm actually going to be talking to you a little bit about metrics. Tracking progress to achieve your goal. This is really the metrics are the pieces that are going to tell you how you're doing, whether you need to course correct or not. And if you want to dive back into your metrics and make them better, more power to you. That we're going to show you how to do that. Metrics are really key to the whole process. So that's going to be what I talk about today. Oops, real quick. This is my section, measuring and reporting results. You go from, and it's nice this year because you're really going to only be worried about the year one outcomes. You can see, so from left to right, you have your metric and your baseline, which was done last year. Year one outcome is what you're going to be reporting out this year. Years 2 and 3 are in the future. They're not out yet, and you're not going to be doing anything with those. You may or may not adjust your desired outcomes for 22-23. So we're going to talk about that. So again, just a little bit more of an amplification of that previous slide. I want you to pay close attention to, so like I said, you get your metric and your baselines. The goal of this year 1, year 2, year 3 outcomes is to try to close that gap, right? So we know that improvement takes time, and over time we want to see your metrics improve, right? This year we're really going to be focused on just the year 1 outcome, like I said before. And in some cases we're going to notice that the baseline is actually higher than year 1 outcome, and that's okay. That's real. That's why you have an LCAP. That's why you might adjust some actions. That's why you might add a metric. You may add pieces to the metrics. There's a lot of things you could do. Just know this isn't about being perfect at all. This isn't about being, we're just trying to be real and course correct to improve outcomes for our kids. And in order to do that, we have to know legitimately where we are in the process. So you see my little guy with the magnifying glass. One of the things we've realized over time is how nice it is to have metrics that align in the document. So notice the pink box here, just using 1A as an example, how it goes from left to right, easy, simple to read, transparent. A parent could read this. Students could read this, very, very straightforward, left to right. Notice 1B, same thing, and 1C. So what's special, I'll say, about this is that they're all on one row. Okay, so actually I said they're all. So they're all on different rows. Okay, so you've got 1A on a row, 1B on a row, 1C on a row. It's easy to read. Like I said, it's not an approvability thing to keep them all on one, but what we see sometimes is we see all the metrics on one row, right? So this is 3 metrics, 3 rows, right? I'm going to show you the next time. Check this out. So 1A, this is all one row. 1A to the left, the metric, and then I just made I just highlighted the baseline, and then go over to the right there, the desired outcome. So that's not all in, like, it's just kind of up and down. I'm going to go to the next one in blue. So you start there with the metric, you have to come up for the baseline, over to the right for the desired outcome. And finally 1C, again, this is the same type of stuff, or same metrics, same as the slide before, it's just organized differently. And it's tough. The document itself is not friendly to this anyways, and we have found that this is just harder to read. It's not, like I told you, it's not an approvability thing, but it is definitely a readability thing. And so we have learned that this is worth your time to just put everything on its separate rows so that it aligns better. So that example, non-example. I'm going to go through about possible things you may be wanting to do with your metrics. Things like if you noticed or realize that your baseline is actually incorrect. If your desired outcome, the one on the far right, you may want to revise it based on, you had a baseline, you have year one, you may need to adjust that revised, or that the desired outcome. It may need to go higher, it may need to go lower. You can do that. You cannot adjust your baseline, but you can adjust your desired outcome. Your one outcome not available. That's going to be the case with a lot of us. So I'm going to go through that. We're going to look at new metric needs to be addressed. So we're going to have a couple of different instances there, examples to show you. And then finally, an existing metric needs to be removed. We're going to show you a technique for how to do that. So this is kind of as these things come up, we're just trying to provide you some guidance for a way to do them. I'll start off here. First couple examples involve an A through G completion rate scenario. Let's just say that you can see here the metric itself is A through G completion, and the baseline initially said 10%. That was 1920, and then we realized, oh, it was 40%. So again, you don't change that baseline here, but you can correct it, and you're just basically annotating it. You're explaining adjustment made due to reporting error. So pretty much that's what I say here on the right, the suggested solution. Make sure that you are mentioning this in prompt 4 of your goal analysis. So it should link together. So you're going to realize that there's something off on it, that goal in prompt 4 for goal analysis, explain it there, and then complete it here. Like I said, you can't get rid of your baseline, but you can certainly correct it. And this is an example of one way to do that. Next example is you're revising a desired outcome. So back to the same example here, A through G desired was 20% based on that 10% initial from 2019. You're realizing, oh my gosh, well, it's actually was at 40%, so you're going to need to adjust it. And in this case, they adjusted it to 40%. So just as it's an example. So you can do that. So you'd say original versus adjusted. And again, make sure that you're mentioning this in prompt 4 analysis section. Next scenario, year one outcome is not available. So just, we know a lot of districts, due to viability issues, did not administer CASP. So there's really no academic indicator on the dashboard. So instead, you had to use some local assessments. You definitely would want to report those, but for CASP, as an example, for the year one outcome, so the metric of the 4A for ELA CASP, distance from standard, CASP was not fully administered in spring of 2021. So see local assessment. A lot of you use STAR, Renaissance STAR. Some of you used iReady. So there's a variety of pieces out there, and some of you actually did administer the SBAC, and so you can report those. You've got a status, but no change. There's no kind of any color in the dashboard, of course. This year you're going to be testing, so you'll have that data for next year. And like I say, select suggested solution, provide, explain it for transparency and provide that alternative metric. Next scenario, new metric needs to be added. So let's just say that you wanted to add a metric. It's pretty simple. The only thing is you'd want to use, you put your metric, whatever that is. It could be replacing a metric. It could be an add-on. But this year's data would become the baseline. So notice that here, 32%, that's 21-22. So it's not a year one outcome, it's the actual baseline. NA, because you're in the baseline, right? So you then report out on year two next year. So if it's a brand new metric, first year is always going to be baseline, and then you skip to the correct year. So again, you'd want to mention the addition of this in prompt 4 of the goal analysis section. Obviously here too, it says desired outcome for 23-24. You'd want to go ahead and estimate that for yourself as well. Here's a little bit of a different situation, and this kind of piggybacks off of last session's one of their goals. So you can see the deal here, this is about improving outcomes for English learners. So the goal in this example, improve academic and language proficiency for English learners is the goal. The metrics that were used were local ELA assessment, like iReady, quarterly grades, LCAP scores. And if you look at your actions, all of these actions on the left go towards the goal here of improving academic and language proficiency for ELs through these metrics. In this case, in this example, we decided to add a metric that was more of a state level metric that you could possibly show a comparison of all students versus English learners, just as a comparison. But we felt like in this example, it was a good idea to go ahead and add a state metric to this. The local metrics are great, but it's nice to add that state level so that you can kind of compare to all students and really drill down on knowing when what you're doing is working, when you're closing the gap. So just another example. Right? My last scenario, existing metric needs to be removed. This will happen. Sometimes you might take an action out. You may need to replace the metric. There's a lot of different reasons this may or may not happen. So actions are removed, programs are ended, resulting in the completion of a metric. Suggested solution is that you just simply report out your year one outcome. So in this example here, you can see they went ahead and reported out their year one outcome. Indicate NA for the next 2 years, and indicate that the metric is retired in the desired outcome. So again, transparency, you're just explaining what happened. And then of course, you mentioned the removal in prompt 4 of the goal analysis. This is also where you might add, talk about what you're adding, right? So just another example for you. And I'm gonna go back here. Anything you need help with, you call us. We're here to help. We want to be proactive and have you guys reach out to us if you want to know how to have a partner or a thinking partner and how to add a metric or remove a metric, whatever. You've got these, but you've also got us. You can call us anytime. Okay, my next slide here. So notice that I have the icon. These are both linked to our resource guide. On the left, you see that this is the same sheet that we handed out last year, although it's updated. Notice there's an update that says updated to 28-22. We're going to continue to update this document. It goes deep into the different priorities and metrics and how to measure them. We have some information on there about how to use, what report to use in CalPads if you want, or Greg West is working hard to add in ClickPads for kids. So this is one of those documents that will continue to be updated all season to make it better and better for you. It's also linkable, clickable to more detail about the priorities. You can see statements of model practices are in there. Those are best practices. We did this to give you more ideas if you're thinking about changing a metric or switching a metric, going deeper with a metric. So that's there. It's actually, if you print it, it's on legal paper this time because there's so much to it. But we kind of recommend it as an electronic document just for reference. On the right, you'll see that this is the whole child resource map. This links straight to the CDE website. It goes really deep into the different metrics or priorities. Sorry, not the metrics, the priorities that will support metrics. Candy's going to talk more about the priorities in her session. Let's see. Kids is coming on big time. Like I said, Greg West has the current integrated data system really plugging away, and there's been a lot of intentionality to support LCAP. And I just clicked here and you can see this is a graph, looks like a line chart that it shows all students compared to a couple different student groups on the left. And on the right, it quantifies the same information a little bit different visually for you. So he's going to actually be here March 8th when we do our virtual follow-up, and he's going to show you how to really dig deeper, maybe add to your metrics. And if you have all students and you're not separating student groups, it's really hard to tell if you're closing gaps if you only report out on all students. So he's going to show you some really quick ways to drill down on the data, to be able to look at the early warning system. This is really what it's all about. This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of closing gaps, and he's going to be here to explain that next week. On the left, I have a little digging deeper paper I found, and it's so true, the last part of this. As we dig deeper, as we get more detailed, as we call out the gaps that we have, and we try to close them together, your audience, your educational partners are going to know more about your topic, right? They're going to know more and be able to understand why you're putting resources where you're putting them. So really important to support all kids, especially kids that are behind in our uneducated student population. So excited to have Greg with us next week. I am done. I am going to hand this over to my good friend Jonathan Gage, and he is going to take you through the next step. It's going to be goals and action section. Okay, thank you guys.
Thanks, Chip. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a little bit of context and overview for the goals and actions section. Really, the purpose of the goals and actions section is to clearly communicate to your educational partners. In doing so, you're going to communicate what the LEA plans to accomplish, so the goals, why the LEA plans to accomplish this, the why, how the LEA plans to accomplish this through your actions, and how the LEA knows when it has accomplished this goal through the measures of progress, and also what fiscal resources are being used to support the goal, the action tables. So once again, like we talked about, transparency. So clearly communicating with your educational partners to make sure that you're providing transparency. And by doing it clearly, really speaks to the equity of your LCAP plan. So I really like this quote by Albert Einstein: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So just once again, making sure that it is put in terms that your educational partners and your parents can actually understand. So requirement for goals and actions, we want to make sure that the LCAP must include a description of those annual goals to be achieved for each student group, for each state priority, and for any local priorities identified by the local governing body. Also, the LCAP must include an annual review of the effectiveness of the goals, actions, services from the prior year, which Lily and Michael went over recently. Now let's talk about goals, addressing those varying needs through different goals. So in the template for goals, metrics, and actions, we're going to focus on this first piece right here, the goal description and why for each type of goal. So some considerations here is to make sure that goals address each of the state priorities and any local priorities. However, one of those lessons learned here is to make sure that we know that one goal can actually address multiple priorities. Also, a goal may focus on the performance of all students, one or more specific groups, narrowing performance gap, or the implementation of certain programs and strategies to improve student outcomes. Also, an LEA may identify that a goal is applicable only to a certain school site or particular student groups. Some other considerations for your goals is making sure that the goal is aligned with your identified needs in the plan summary reflections. So those identified needs and or the engaging educational partners section of the LCAP. We also want to make sure that the measures of progress and actions are aligned to what the LEA plans to accomplish. So I know you have your goals set that you're working on, so I'll just be real brief about each of these. There are 4 types of goals this year. There's a broad, focus, maintenance of progress goal, and then there is a new required goal for certain LEAs with low that have low performing student groups or low performing schools that were identified. This little icon here shows us that there is a link to those low performing student groups and low performing school list on our resource document. So talking about goal descriptions, for broad goals, you'll want to describe what the LEA plans to achieve through the actions included in that goal. Now, your focus goal is a little bit more specific, measurable, and time bound. Your maintenance of progress goal, you're going to want to describe how the LEA intends to maintain the progress made towards LCFF state priorities that are not listed in other goals in the LCAP. For your required goal, you're going to want to make sure that you're addressing those low performing student groups or the low performing schools. Now, your management analyst has already reached out to you if you have a required goal for your LCAP. Now let's just talk about a little bit of some examples here. So these are some simple examples to kind of just show you the difference between a focused, a broad, and a maintenance goal here. So just if you quickly look over it, you can see a focus goal, like I said, is a little bit more specific. It has those student groups in it. It has the numerics in it that's measurable, increasing that attendance rate to 93% by a certain date and time. Your broad goal is more wide sweeping, implementing systems and structures to improve student engagement for all students. And then your maintenance goal is maintaining those systems and structures for continued student engagement. Now, a little bit more specific about what a goal might look like. So the goals that we just went over were each an engagement type goal. Right here, we have some examples of what a focus, broad, and maintenance goal would look like with a little bit more detail and specificity. So if you want to, you can come back to this slide and pause it and read through these and get a little bit more detail on what we would consider a well-written goal. I'd like to spend a little bit of time on the whys for each goal. This is an area that the team has learned a little bit more about as we moved on. And there was some mismatch in the actions and the measurements for each goal. So we want to make sure that we are aligning the whys for each goal and goal type. So for a broad goal, why the goal was developed. We want to make sure that in the why section, our educational partners clearly understand and it's transparent to them why the goal was developed, and also how the actions and metrics grouped together will help the district achieve that broad goal. Now, for our focus goal, we want to make sure that we're communicating why this goal was prioritized specifically. Also, that it needs to be based on data, so either a dashboard or the local data that we have. And then also how the LEA identified this goal, including through consultation with their educational partners. Now, for our maintenance of progress goal, under the why, we want to list how the actions will sustain the progress exemplified by the related metrics. Then lastly, on our required goal for our why section, we want to make sure that we have the why the goal is required, including any student groups that led to that requirement, and then also how actions metrics differ from previous efforts to improve outcomes and why they are believed to help achieve such outcome. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit of an example, so revising the why explanation of the goal. So let you take just a few seconds, read that goal description focused on grade level mastery and academic performance, and then the why here. And the one thing I wanted to point out in this example or the explanation of the why is just this piece right here where the recognition of specific needs of student groups not yet achieving at or above standard. So just really remembering in the instructions, we're explaining why the LE developed the goal and how the actions and metrics grouped together will help achieve this goal. So really, when we talk about specific groups not achieving, it would really be nice to kind of break that down and get a little bit more information in regards to which student groups and where are they at. So to give you kind of an example of this same goal updated with a little bit more specific information, a little bit more detailed for the reader, you can see adding those student groups in there. Also the point difference, 1.6 points respectively, and then kind of where they're at status wise. In addition, that feedback from educational partners is key and listed in here in the why, along with other ways to increase academic support for these students. And now I'm going to turn it over to Candy to talk about actions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now we're going to be talking about actions in your LCAP. And remember, the actions really tell us how we plan to achieve our goal. So before we begin, we want to take you back to the goal analysis that was covered during our last session in this development series. So we want you to really have this goal analysis in the forefront as you are looking at what actions you will be implementing for this year's LCAP. For example, if we had actions that through the analysis we determined were being successful, we might ask ourselves, how might we continue and strengthen those actions and maybe expand upon what's working? If we have actions that maybe were not as effective, then maybe we might look at how we can revise them to make them more effective. Also, if you recall from the goal analysis, we also looked at some carryover dollars. What carryover funds are you going to have rolling into this LCAP, and how might you either expand upon some actions with increased funding, or maybe develop some new actions with the use of those funds? And as Chip mentioned, really the goal of this LCAP is to improve equity for your students. And how you do that is really through your actions. Remember, your actions are the supports, the services that you are going to be providing to your students through your LCAP dollars. So really, this is a great opportunity for you to develop actions that are meeting this intended need. And also keep in mind that those actions then feed into your increase and improve services section, which is really how we're showing and demonstrating that we are meeting the intent of LCFF funds, which is really to improve outcomes for our unduplicated students. So here's a tool that you might use as you're looking to make your actions more equitable for all. This tool comes from San Diego County Office of Education, and you can see that we have linked it to the resource document for this session. So let's suppose that during your goal analysis, one of the areas that you were struggling in was around school climate. So you would use this tool, you'd click on Priority 6 for school climate, and you see that it's going to give you some ideas on how you might produce more equitable outcomes for students for this priority area. So this would be a great tool for you to use as with your teams as you're looking to operationalize equity. This is just a quick preview of this tool. We plan on going in depth during our upcoming workshop, but we did want to share this with you and highlight how you might be able to use this tool as you are revising your actions. So let's do a quick reminder of the action tables. One thing I do want to point out here is the action table section of the template has not changed. So all of this is the same as it was the previous year. So I just want to do a quick reminder. Remember, in that very first column, you're going to put the number of your action. Next, you're going to add a title, a short title for your action. Remember, this title will also appear on the action tables. Then you are going to provide a description for your action. And really, this is where the bulk of our time today is going to be around the description section of the table. Next, you will add the total funds for this action. And last but not least, you're going to determine whether this action is contributing or not by marking yes or no. So I do want to point out this section specifically. This is really important. And making that determination whether the action is contributing or not is an area that our folks tend to struggle with. So as you are determining whether this action is contributing or not, you have to really ask yourself, is this action improving and increasing services for our unduplicated students? So to do that, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. First, you're going to ask yourself, is this action addressing an identified need for unduplicated students. Next, you're going to ask yourself, are my unduplicated students going to benefit to a greater extent from this action when compared to all students? And last of all, you're going to ask yourself, is this action being funded with S&C dollars? If you can respond yes to all three of those questions, then you would say, yes, this action meets the requirement for a contributing action. Remember, only the actions that are marked yes as contributing will be counted towards meeting your MPP. So let's talk about how we might revise actions based on need. So here we have an example that was shared with you previously during the workshop with Michael and Lily on the goal analysis section. So we have it's goal number 4, which is to improve academic and language proficiency for English learners. And then you're going to see this description. We know that this action is around a homework after school homework support program. It's being provided at every campus and facilitated by a teacher. So if you recall from the workshop, as we did the analysis for this action, we were able to collect some data. One thing I want to point out is that when asked, parents reported that transportation was a barrier that prevented their students from attending every day. When we looked at the overall implementation, we saw that this action was fully implemented at all school sites, but not all the students that we had meant to target were attending regularly. We had some successes. We had students who attended regularly. They did show some improvement in their grades. And we did know it was more successful at some sites than in others. Some challenges that came out of this analysis was that transportation was a barrier, and that some students were feeling that this was maybe this program was more of a punishment as opposed to an opportunity. So based on that analysis, here is just one way that we might revise this action. We saw that transportation was a big concern. So you can see that to strengthen this action, we have added a new component, which is to increase the number of students who are participating in this after-school homework support. We're going to add a late bus route. You're going to see that in addition to adding that to the description, we also increase the funds to show that we are going to be providing that additional service to this action. So you might ask yourself, how else could I revise this action based on need? Well, we might look at other ways, maybe messaging the intent of this program, maybe how we might include some incentives for our students so that they really see this as an opportunity and not something that's punitive. So that's just one example on how you can revise existing actions based on the analysis that was previously done. So now let's talk about some lessons learned. You can see we have our little guy here showing us that this was something that we learned from last year's LCAP season. So one thing that came up was how we develop clear actions. So you can see we have a new example here. And in this example, we're talking about intervention programs. This description says students who are struggling and performing below standard will be identified for math and reading intervention services, including online platforms and after-school programs. One of the things that you're going to see here and what we often saw during last year's LCAP was that it wasn't really clear what was being funded. You see, we have $170,000 allocated, but it's not really clear what those funds are being paid for and what is the intent of this action. So we want to ask ourselves, does this action clearly articulate how and what something is going to be done? Is the action clear? Is it well written so that it is clear and comprehensible? And we might ask ourselves these questions. And remember, we shared this during last year's LCAP series, making sure our actions answer who, does what, for whom, and what is the intended outcome. So now let's talk about how we might rewrite this action to make it more clear. So you'll see on this slide, we still have the same action. Funds have not changed. The only thing that has changed is now we have added some more language to the description to make it more clear. Now you'll see in bold, we added 3 part-time intervention specialists. We'll be facilitating the after-school program. We have the intent. The intent is to increase student achievement in ELA and math. We know we're going to be providing supplemental resources, and we're going to be allocating funds for stipends for instructional aides to support during after-school hours. So you can see how we were able to add some language just to make it really clear. Now, when we look at the funds being allocated, we have much more clarity as to what exactly is being funded. Another lesson learned is around bundling actions. So what is bundled actions? Bundling is when a district lumps different items together into a single action. And this was a big takeaway for us during last year's LCAP cycle. So let's talk about bundling. We know bundling is great if you're trying to save money by bundling your car and home insurance, but bundling is not such a great idea when we're talking about LCAP actions. And let's talk a little bit about why that's probably not the best idea. So we do want to begin with sharing that there are some instances where bundling would be appropriate. So let's look at this first example. We have one action that encompasses textbooks, computer-based instructional materials, and lab equipment. You'll see in this example, all of the items are being funded with the same funding stream, which in this case would be base funding, because they would all be non-contributing. You'll see that they're going to be provided to the same target audience, which is all students. And it's going to be, the scope is going to be the same. It's going to be provided district-wide. Another action where this would be permissible is if we have an action that encompasses EL tutors, EL supplemental curriculum, and professional development to meet the needs of our EL students. In this case, this would be permissible because you're going to see that all the funds are being funded, all the actions are being funded out of contributing dollars, SNC funds. You're going to see that they're all directed towards the same student group, which in this case is English learners. And once again, these will be provided to the same scope, which would be district-wide. So let's talk about when bundling is not permissible. So an example of a permissible bundling of an action would be if we had textbooks, college counselors, AP exams, library aids for elementary schools, and EL language interventions. So why would this not be allowable? Well, first of all, you can see that we have items here, which would be funded out of non-contributing dollars, which would be your base. For example, your textbooks and maybe your library aids. And then you have some items that would be contributing, such as your EL language interventions. You're also going to see that the target audience is different within these specific items. For example, some are funded specifically toward EL, like our language intervention, and some are targeting all students. For example, our textbooks and our library aids. You'll see that the scope is different. Some of these are being provided just to high schools. Some of them are being provided just to elementary schools. And last but not least, you're going to notice that these are not aligned to the same metric. The way that you would be evaluating the effectiveness of your college counselors would be very different from how you're evaluating the effectiveness of your EL interventions. How might we fix this? Well, one easy way would be to separate this into different actions. So you can see we have one action, which is around textbooks. Second action would be around college counselors and AP exams. Third action would be library aids. And then action 4 would be those EL interventions. So why does this matter? Well, first of all, when we have too many items grouped into one action, it really makes it hard to be able to discern how much the district is spending on each one of those items. It also makes it much more difficult to assess the effectiveness of each one of those expenditures because we are looking at actions that may have different metrics associated with them. It also allows us to mix base and SNC funding in a way that really ends up being counterproductive to the overall process. This was an area that we really learned a lot from last year, where we would have our districts sometimes bundle non-contributing items with contributing items. And then it became really difficult to see what was actually contributing and actually counting that correct amount towards your MPP. And so what we ended up having to do is have districts go back and either unbundle those actions, or they would have to go and add additional language to make it really clear what was being funded with what funds. And last but not least, when we bundle, it really makes it hard to remain transparent. And as we know, transparency for your educational partners is one of the goals of your LCAP. So before we move on to action tables, I have a couple of reminders for you. The first is that you are required, if you are an LEA that has a numerically significant EL population, meaning you have an EL population of 30 students or more, you are required to develop an action that is specifically addressing your EL students. That action at a minimum needs to address language acquisition, and it needs to address professional development activities specific to your ELs. That can be done through multiple actions, through one action where you're addressing both, but you need to make sure that you are at least at a minimum addressing those two areas. You are also encouraged but not required to develop an action for your foster youth if you have a numerically significant population of 15 or more foster students. With these actions, you can develop an action that is designed to meet the needs of your foster youth students. I just want to clarify, you are required if you have 30 or more ELs to write an action for your ELs. If you have 15 or more foster youth, you are encouraged but not required to develop an action that addresses their specific needs. And we know that we oftentimes just want to look at some sample language. So just a reminder before we close, really thinking about developing our descriptions based on this frame. Who does what for whom and what is the intended outcome? You can see in this specific sample, we have the who, which is our full-time counselor. What is that counselor going to do? They're going to provide counseling for who? For students. And what's the intended outcome? Meeting their students' social emotional needs. So making sure it's really clear what is being funded, what's the intent of the action is really the best recommendation that we can make as you're looking to revise your actions for this year. And with that, I will turn it over to Max, who's going to talk to you about the action tables.
Thank you, Candy. My name is Max Garris. I'm one of the fiscal analysts here at the county office, and today I'll be going over action tables, which are the total plan expenditure table and the contributing actions table. And I will be covering both the LCAP template, which is provided by the CDE on their website, and I'll also cover a little bit later the DTS tables and how those work. As far as the LCAP template, they're comprised of 3 different sections. The first one is the data entry table. This is where you'll pretty much put in all of your information for the year. And then that'll feed into the total planned expenditure tables and then the contributing action tables. Also included are the 21-22 annual update table, 21-22 contributing actions annual update table, and then the LCFF carryover table. And these were all covered in our last session by Jonathan. The LCAP template, you will actually be submitting 2 separate worksheets for these, one for the current year, 21-22, which Jonathan covered last time. And then the second one, which I'm going to cover today, includes the total planned expenditure table and the contributing action table. Now, to get started on these, you start at the data entry tab. You can see it's all the way to the left. This is where you're going to put in all your information for the year. Just looking at the first box, this is your projected LCFF base grant amount. And you will get this amount from your May revise LCFF calculator. So once that becomes available, you'll take that information and you'll input it here. And the same thing with the box next to it is your projected supplemental and concentration amount. And again, you'll just pull this straight off of your LCFF calculator and input it here. Now this, the third box, this will calculate your percentage of your improved increase in improved services. And then your LCFF carryover percentage. This is the amount that Jonathan went over last time. And you'll get this from your 21-22 carryover table that you complete, and you'll just add it right there, and then it'll calculate a new total percentage. And then on this bottom section of the data entry tab, this is where you put in all of your goals and actions, the titles, the student groups it serves, whether it's contributing or not contributing, and just all of that information in addition to the funds and the fund sources, and that'll calculate all the way over to get a total fund amount. So this is pretty much the meat of the process here. You want to make sure everything in here is correct and is as accurate as possible. And then you go over to the next table, which is the total expenditure table. And all of this data is pulled directly from the data entry table. So you'll just want to go in here and just double check a couple things to make sure your LCFF funds are correct, your actions and title or goals and actions are correct, and your amounts are correct. And then from there, you'll go to your contributing action table. Same thing here. Everything gets pulled over from the data entry table. So you just want to look at it, make sure everything looks correct. There's no issues with the formulas or anything like that. And this is your contributing action table. Now, you'll notice here on the second action here, it says contributing. It says no. So there is no amount over here because this table is only for contributing action tables. And then that's pretty much it on the LCAP template. Now, as far as DTS action tables, they're more or less the same thing, but they're just arranged a little bit differently. There's no data entry table. The total planned expenditure tables doesn't have the word planned in it, and the contributing action tables doesn't have the word actions in it. We talked to DTS last week, and they said they're still finalizing the final version of DTS, so they may or may not change the wording of it. I just wanted to highlight that just in case they don't change it, and I didn't want there to be any confusion. So on the DTS tables, you'll go to the table contents here, and you'll select goals and actions to get started. And then I'm sure all of you have seen this before. Chip covered a little bit earlier today in this presentation, where you input your metrics, your baseline, and just all your information for your goals and actions. And then from here, if you scroll down a little bit further on this page, you will come to this section here. And this is the fiscal section here. This is where you will put in your amounts, whether it's non-personnel or personnel. You'll put in the amounts here, and then as you can see, it totals up to what the total is, and that's your total amount for that goal action. And then on the population served, I'm going to turn this over to Candy, just so she can explain a little bit better on how to populate this area here. Thank you, Candy. And again, the amounts you put in here, and it just totals and it creates a total over here. And then from here, once you've done that for all your goals and actions, you go to your total expenditure tables. And this is what it looks like here. You can see everything is pre-populated. It's from your goals and actions section of the information you just inputted, and the amounts will get put in here and just get carried over. And then for the contributing expenditure tables, exact same thing. Everything will just be pulled from there, and only your contributing actions amounts will show up here. And then that's pretty much it for the action tables on both the DTS side and the LCAP template side. There's not a whole lot to it. Just to make sure that the entry you put in there, whether it's your data entry table or on the DTS side of things, just to make sure it's as accurate as possible when it's put in. And just some key takeaways here. You just want to make sure that your base amount and your supplemental concentration grant amounts are included in the contributing action tables. And you want to make sure that planned expenditures and funding sources are carried over verbatim from your 21-22 LCAP. Also on the contributing action tables, make sure planned contributing expenses are greater than or equal to the district's supplemental concentration amount, because remember, that's the amount that is the minimum amount that needs to be spent for increased improved services. And then ensure only actions that contribute to increased improved services are included. And as always, we're here as a resource. So if you have any questions or just want to go over anything that you did or just get a review of something, feel free to reach out to your fiscal analyst and we will be more than happy to help you with anything. Thank you. And now I will send it back to Candy just for some closing thoughts.
Thank you, Max. And before we close for today, we just want to remind you that we highly encourage you to add any questions that you might have to the virtual parking lot. We will be responding to those questions directly on this sheet so that everybody can see what responses we have to those questions. And we will also be covering these questions during our upcoming workshop. So we want to give you a reminder that follow-up workshop will be on March 8th from 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. During this workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to be doing the Q&A from the parking lot. We're also going to be sharing some other resources and tools on how you might revise and improve your LCAP, actions, goals, and metrics. And then we're also going to give you some time to collaborate with other participants. And then I do want to point out that our next video for Increase and Improve Service section, as we mentioned earlier, the date has changed. That date will now be released on March 23rd. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more time to make sure that you've gotten caught up on all of the previous recordings, because we know that you guys have been very busy. And with that, I want to thank you on behalf of all of our team. Thank you for your time. As always, you know, we are here as well as your fiscal partners. We are here to support you through this process. So please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can support you with. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day.